Well, good morning, Bay Shore. You guys excited to be here today? It is so good to see all of you today, and if we have not been able to meet before, my name is Cotter, and I am the Next Steps pastor here, and I get asked a lot, what is a Next Steps pastor? Like, what do you even do? Well, a lot of things, but the main thing is I help people connect to the church. So at Bay Shore, we believe that if you are involved in a small group, if you are involved in a serving team, that is so important for your faith. It is so important to have people that are by your side every day, that are cheering you on through the ups and downs of life. And so if you need any help getting more involved, that is what I'm here to help with. And we have ways for people to connect, even for people that don't even live here in Delaware. And so that's what our online family is about. And every Sunday we've got people that join us online from all over the place through Facebook and through YouTube, people that listen during the week on the podcast. So if you're watching online this morning, thank you so much for being with us today. Can we make some noise for our online family? Well, today is a big day. This week is a big week. This is Palm Sunday. Next Sunday is Easter. Now, if you made a resolution at the beginning of the year to start going to the gym more, and if you have not stuck with that resolution very well, this is the week to get back to the gym. Because imagine how good you're going to feel next Sunday if you've lost a couple pounds and now you can eat as much Easter candy as you want. Look, going to the gym this week, it is not about getting ahead. It is about creating room for jelly beans. That is what it is all about. Now, Palm Sunday, when I was a kid, we loved Palm Sunday. It was always such a special one because that was the Sunday that we came to church and we got those palm branches every week. Did anybody get palm branches as a kid going to church? Man, loved getting those things. And it seemed like every year in Sunday school, they would have us do this activity where we would fold them and make them into like palm branch crosses. Anybody do that? We got a picture of some of those. And they would look really amazing. But one thing our teachers didn't really think about is that if you turn them upside down, they're basically swords. And what happens when you give a bunch of elementary school boys something that looks basically exactly like a sword? Sword fights happen. And my brother and I, every year, we were having sword fights with our palm branches. And so if you wonder why your kids are not getting palm branches in Sunday school today, it is because we don't want their eyes to get poked out from sword fights. So we always had fun with those. But, we definitely kind of missed the point of Palm Sunday by turning those things upside down and having sword fights. Is it true that sometimes we totally miss the point? Like sometimes we were just totally on the wrong page. Well, as we hop into the Palm Sunday story this morning, we're going to look at Jesus coming into Jerusalem, and the people of Jerusalem completely missed the point of why he was coming in there. And so we're going to get into the Bible today. And we say it every week, but we've got free Bibles out in the lobby. They are on the table next to the coffee. So if you need a Bible, if you have a friend that needs a Bible, we've got some out there in the lobby. Now, today we're going to be hanging out in the book of Matthew. We're going to be starting in chapter 21 with verse 1, and we will put this up on the screen. So Matthew 21, starting in verse 1, it says, "As they approached Jerusalem and came to Bethphage on the Mount of Olives, Jesus sent 2 disciples, saying to them, 'Go to the village ahead of you, and at once you will find a donkey tied there with her colt by her. Untie them and bring them to me. If anyone says anything to you, say that the Lord needs them, and he will send them right away.' This took place to fulfill what was spoken through the prophet, 'Say to your daughter Zion, see, your king comes to you, gentle and riding on a donkey and on a colt, the foal of a donkey.' The disciples went and did as Jesus had instructed them. They brought the donkey and the colt and placed their cloaks on them for Jesus to sit on." So Jesus and his disciples, they are approaching Jerusalem. And then Jesus has this moment where he does something kind of amazing. He tells his disciples to go to this village up ahead that they're approaching. And he tells them that they're going to find a donkey and a colt there. Now, what's crazy about this is none of them have been to this village. So Jesus is telling them to go ahead into this village, that they're going to find a donkey, they're going to find a colt. He tells them exactly what to say. And he would have had no way of knowing that if he wasn't God's son. And I think that is such an interesting thing. It's so cool how we can kind of see that before they even got there. And Matthew, who wrote this book that we're reading, he has a note here to explain the significance of Jesus gathering these 2 animals. So there was a prophecy in the book of Zechariah in the Old Testament of the Bible that said these exact words that we read here in verse 5. It was a prediction that the Messiah, which is Jesus, would ride in on a donkey and a colt. And this prophecy, it was made over 500 years before Jesus was alive. 500 years, like a super, super long time. If you think about how long 500 years is, if you think back 500 years in the past from right now, in 1524, in the east coast of America, it had not even been discovered by European countries yet. There were no hot dogs here. There was no baseball. There was barely anything of what we know was here 500 years ago. But that's how long before Jesus came that this prophecy was spoken. And so it said this specific person is going to go to this specific place and they're going to ride in on this donkey and a colt. And the odds of that actually happening were so low. But Jesus fulfilled that prophecy. And that's just another example of how Jesus was truly God's son, that he truly was the Messiah. So the disciples, they go into this village and they bring back the donkey and the colt for Jesus to ride on. And we'll hop back into the story here with verse 8. It says, a very large crowd spread their cloaks on the road, while others cut branches from the trees and spread them on the road. The crowds that went ahead of him and those that followed shouted, Hosanna to the Son of David. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest heaven. When Jesus entered Jerusalem, the whole city was stirred and asked, who is this? The crowds answered, this is Jesus, the prophet from Nazareth in Galilee. So here's our palm branches, the ones that my brother and I incorrectly used in Sunday school. This is why they are a part of Palm Sunday. So Jesus, he rides into Jerusalem and he is given this incredible welcome. And think about the end of a wedding reception when the bride and groom are getting ready to leave and you've got everybody kind of lined up on that path and people are cheering for them and blowing bubbles and launching rice at them and all the things people do and everybody's just so excited. That's kind of the picture of what's happening here as Jesus comes into Jerusalem. And everybody is so excited. They're yelling, Hosanna, Hosanna. And that phrase means save us. And a more literal translation of that phrase means we beg you to save or please deliver us. And so they saw Jesus coming. They recognized that the Messiah was coming to save them. So they were so excited that he was coming to bring them salvation. But salvation in their minds meant something completely different than what we think about. When we hear the word salvation in church, we think about being saved from our sin. That's not what they were thinking about. What was on their minds was having a literal salvation from their Roman rulers. They wanted Jesus to come in and conquer the Romans. So if we back up a little bit and look back at verse 8, we'll put this back on the screen. It says, a very large crowd spread their cloaks on the road, while others cut branches from the trees and spread them on the road. Kind of sounds like a weird thing to do, right? Like, I don't know about you, I've never put my coat down on the ground for someone to walk on before. And I love my members-only jackets. I really don't want to see farm animals walking on them. But that's exactly what these people did. They got their coats off and they put them on the ground. They put palm branches down. And there was a significance to why they did this. In ancient times, spreading your clothes on the ground, especially your coats, was something you did to recognize royalty. So them taking their coats off and putting them on the ground before Jesus was saying, we recognize you as king. And the palm branches also had significance. The palm branches, those were a sign of Israel's past military victories. And so the people throwing down their coats, putting out these palm branches, these were ways for them to show Jesus that they believed he was the king, and they believed that he was going to provide a military victory for them over the Romans. So they're psyched. They are so glad that Jesus has arrived. They're 100% behind him because in their minds, he's going to give them exactly what they have always wanted. They're going to have freedom. They're going to have peace. But as we know, the story didn't really go that way. Didn't go that way at all. Jesus didn't come into town, put on his Iron Man suit, and take out the Romans. Instead, throughout the next few days, he went to the religious leaders in Jerusalem, and he talked to them about how far they had strayed away from the ways of God. And they did not like that. They didn't like it at all. So they started to turn on Jesus. And then they rallied up all the people in Jerusalem, the ones that were just worshiping Jesus, and they rallied them against him as well, so that they turned against him. And so just a few days after they welcomed Jesus as their king, they hung him on a cross. They chose to even spare the life of a really bad criminal and let him go free just so that Jesus would be killed. And they celebrated the arrival of Jesus because of what they thought he was going to bring for them. And when they realized that their expectations were wrong, they just turned completely against him. And I think the story is so interesting. I think it's so fascinating how quickly their minds shifted, how quickly they went from praising him and worshiping him as their king to then hanging him on a cross. It just took a couple days. And a lot happened in their minds in that time, and that's what we're going to look at today. Now, how many of you guys have ever been out of the country before? Okay, I have been out of the country 3 times, but it's more like 2.5 because the first time I went to Niagara Falls. And that's, I don't know, that doesn't really count. I don't even think we needed a passport. So the second time was in high school. We went to Costa Rica on a mission trip. And then the third time was when my wife Emily and I got to go on an all-inclusive vacation to the Dominican Republic. Now, Michael Scott taught me that all-inclusive means awesome. So I was super, super excited for this trip. I was so pumped. In my head, I was going to be laying on a beach all week, and when I checked in to get my room keys, they were going to hand me a bell. And then I could just lay on the beach with that bell and ring it whenever I wanted, and somebody would come bring me Mountain Dew, and somebody else would come bring me a freshly warmed up cinnamon roll, and I could just lay there on the beach all week doing whatever I wanted. I was so pumped. That's not what happened at all. It really didn't go like that. So we got off the plane, and we're in the airport, and the people from our resort brought like this car up there so that we could kind of ride with them to the resort. And we get in the car, and the first thing they say is, "Hey, nice to meet you. Don't go off the resort." Like ever. And we knew that, like we did our research and all that kind of stuff. But then they spent the entire drive from the airport to the resort talking to us about how many people get kidnapped. So just, A+ start to the trip. So then we get there and we get out of the van and they say, here, these guys are going to take your bags now. And I was like, I don't know about that. And so I'm looking around and I'm like, which one of you guys is going to try to kidnap me? And so I just needed a reset. So we went to our room. We got our keys and everything. We went to our room. And the first thing I did was like, all right, let's just chill for a minute. Let me lock the door and we'll just kind of regroup. There's no lock on the door. It's like you can use your little electronic key card. Listen, I've watched enough Jason Bourne movies. I know you can clone those cards. Anybody could get into that room. And so I was not feeling relaxed. It was not the vacation I was expecting. And all I wanted in that moment was an all-inclusive flight back to America. That is what I wanted. I wanted less seaweed on the beaches and more door locks. Now, isn't it true that sometimes our expectations aren't met? Sometimes things go a completely different way than we anticipate, and how we respond to that is so important. And I think where the people of Jerusalem in this Palm Sunday story got off track was how they responded when their expectations weren't met. When things didn't go their way, they went completely off the rails. They totally missed the point of Jesus' entry into the city. Yeah, he came as a king, but not one who was going to conquer the Romans. Not one who was going to deliver them from their circumstances. Jesus came as so much more. He came as a divine king who was going to conquer their sin, who was going to provide them eternal freedom and eternal peace. Freedom from the Romans, that would have just been a temporary, small blessing for their present moment. Freedom from sin, what Jesus actually came to Jerusalem to bring, that was an infinitely greater blessing. It was one for the present moments, but also for all of eternity. God's plan was so much greater than what they had in their minds. But the people of Jerusalem, they completely missed the point. So how did they get there? How did their minds flip so quick to turn against him? Well, they had high hopes that he was going to be that king that would save them from the everyday trials they experienced. And when they wanted immediate rescue and he didn't deliver it, well, they got frustrated. And they got angry. Now, imagine this scenario. Okay, this is totally made up, not connected to any real stuff. Imagine every day you drive on Route 24 to get to work. And every day for the last 2 years, You've been driving through construction, but you say to yourself every morning, you say, listen, it is going to be okay, because when I get to the end of this 2 years, this 2-lane highway is going to be a 4-lane road. And it's going to be awesome. There's going to be no more backups. It won't take me 45 minutes to get from Baywoods to Route 1. It is going to be amazing. Fast forward 2 years, and it is still a 2-lane road, and there's more stoplights and more backups. In that pretend scenario, you might be a little upset, right? You might be a little bit frustrated. Well, the people of Jerusalem, they were so upset when they realized that Jesus was not what they were expecting. They were not happy. And we get frustrated when our expectations aren't met. When things don't go the way that we want them to go, we get very upset. And can anybody relate to that? Well, I think there's a couple things that we can learn from how these people handled their disappointment, because they obviously didn't handle it well. And I think we can learn from that so that we can better handle the disappointments that we face in life. Now, I've got 2 thoughts for you this morning, and here's the first one. We can put it on the screen, which is that waiting isn't always bad. Waiting isn't always bad. Now, my kids would 100% disagree with this. Our kids are 1 and 2 years old. They're young, and whenever we tell them to do something or to wait for something, they let us know that they do not like the idea of waiting. And as adults, like, let's be honest, we don't really like to wait for things either. I don't like to wait for things, and if you think about it, there's not a lot of things in life these days that we actually have to wait for. If you want groceries, no need to go to the store. Just pull out your Walmart app, and they will be on your doorstep within an hour. If you want to watch a new movie, no need to go to the store or call the store to see if it's in stock. Just open up your Amazon app, hit that rent button, and you are watching it immediately. Now, how many parents do we have in the room? Awesome. Listen, high five to all of you guys. Parenting is so rewarding, but it is also not super easy. Now, for you more experienced parents in the room, I'm going to need you to think back a little bit to when your kids were pretty young. Now, I'm going to float a scenario to you. Remember, or imagine that your kids are young, like super, super young, and your spouse gets the flu. Okay, so now you are holding down the fort. You are watching the kids. You are taking care of your spouse. You are trying not to get sick, trying to make sure the house doesn't burn down. But then, plot twist, you also get sick. And now there's 0 healthy adults in the house, and the kids are just running around creating chaos everywhere. Has anybody been there? Intense. Listen, that's where Emily and I were a couple weeks ago. It was intense. First, she got sick, and it was not ideal at all. But then I got the flu, and then there were 0 healthy adults. We were just like, what is going on? The kids are winning right now. You know, there's times in life where you just sit back and you say, I don't have control over anything, do I? You know, and that's kind of how I felt. Now, there were some verses in the book of Psalm that came to mind, and I think that the author of these verses in Psalm was speaking at a time when he was experiencing the same situation. We can put these on the screen. It says, I'm overwhelmed with troubles, and my life draws near to death. Right? I'm counted among those who go down to the pit. I'm like one without strength. I'm confined and cannot escape. Amen. My eyes are dim with grief. Man, we were struggling. We were seriously struggling, and after days and days of just being stuck in a house together, we needed a lifeline. And so my wife, Emily, she went on Amazon, and she found this toy. It was like this sub shop toy. It was $20, and so she ordered it. And this toy was a lifesaver. It came to our house with free shipping. It was on sale, and it was on our porch within 24 hours without us ever having to leave the house. It was amazing. Isn't it true that we love the convenience of getting things immediately? It feels so good, but listen, one of the side effects of living in a time where we're so used to immediate gratification is that we're not very good at handling it when things don't go the way that we want, or when we don't get what we want, or when we have to wait, or when our expectations aren't met. We struggle with that because our skills of learning to be patient, learning to struggle, learning to be okay with not getting what we want, we really aren't very good at those skills. We get what we want so often that it's hard for us to handle disappointment. We don't really know how to handle waiting. The people of Jerusalem, they handled their disappointment by killing Jesus just a few days after they were worshiping him. He wasn't doing what they hoped they would do, so they just said, look, let's get this guy out of here. He clearly isn't the king that we thought he was. Let's get rid of him. And I think we handle things in a similar way. When we have to wait, when we don't get our way, we complain. We go from, man, I love my kids. They're the best kids in the world, to, hey, how about we start putting more money in the college fund each month so that when they graduate, they can go to a school really far away. We go from, man, I love my family, to, hey, how about we never take a trip with the in-laws again? Waiting isn't always a bad thing. Sometimes God's best plan for us requires us to have some patience. It requires us to trust and to have faith that he is going to deliver in a way that maybe we can't see yet. It's good for us to have patience. It's good for us to wait for things, because waiting requires us to trust in Jesus. It requires us to rely on him for our peace and our security. Waiting builds our character, and waiting builds our trust in God. So that's our first takeaway from how these people turned on Jesus. Waiting isn't always bad. And here's our second thought, and we can put this on the screen. Don't let your disappointment derail your direction. Don't let your disappointment derail your direction. Disappointments and unmet expectations, they can really shift the direction that we're headed in. And I hope that what we can learn from the story is just how dangerous that is. When we're not anchored, when we just give in to whatever emotional feelings we have in the moment, man, we can make some really, really poor decisions. We say things we shouldn't say, we overreact, we get angry and bitter, we lose hope. Look at these verses from the book of James. This is James 1, verses 6 and 7. It says, if any of you lack wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. But when you ask, you must believe and not doubt, because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea blown and tossed by the wind. Now, these verses, they're talking about the attitude that we should have when we're praying. They're talking about the importance of believing that God is capable for delivering for us. But the aspect of these verses that I believe really connects with our story this morning is the character of the person who trusts God fully. So these verses, they're contrasting two different types of people. The first one is a person who trusts fully, who has a solid foundation, who is steady. And the second person is somebody who isn't. Somebody who is fickle, somebody who is easily swayed, a person who allows their circumstances to dictate how they act. We need to have a strong foundation. We need to anchor into our beliefs about who we are as Jesus followers, about our goals and our values for life, about how we treat our kids and how we treat our spouse. We need to have true gratitude for our friendships, and we need to be firm in these things. Look, that doesn't mean disappointments aren't going to come, because they will. Like that's just life. But we need to be strong and disciplined with how we handle those disappointments, so that when those situations arise that don't meet our expectations, we're able to anchor in and respond well. We shouldn't let the difficult things that we face in life impact how we respond. When the lawnmower won't start, that is not an excuse to let loose all of the words that would get beeped out on TV. When you get a long day at work, that's not an excuse to head to the bar and unwind. When we're driving and we get cut off by somebody, that is not an excuse to roll down the window and tell them they're number one. And look, man, we feel these things. Like, we get upset, we get disappointed, we get angry, but just because we feel those things doesn't mean we act on it. We are not captive to our feelings. We are not captive to our feelings. The course that we set should be our course, regardless of the bumps that we have in the road along the way. When we have a strong foundation, when we're confident in the direction of our lives, we won't be reactive. We won't allow our circumstances to dictate our actions. Instead, the goals that we've set for our lives are what should determine our actions, regardless of what situations we find ourselves in. And here's why this matters. Every day, we have unmet expectations. Every day we deal with disappointments and difficulties. But when we have real, tangible goals for our life, the things that don't go according to our plan, they won't take us completely off course. Those things will be frustrating. Those things will be annoying. But we'll be able to process that and continue moving towards our goals. Where the people of Jerusalem missed the point was they were so quick to change course when things didn't go their way. They turned on Jesus in an instant. They did a 180 in just a matter of a couple of days. They weren't anchored. And because of that, they lost their way. So don't let your disappointment derail your direction. The people of Jerusalem, they had so much praise for Jesus when he came in, but it wasn't anchored in anything. They had no foundation. They wanted him to meet their expectations. And when he didn't, they were out. They were done with him. They had such a me-first view of God. Their view of God was, Jesus, I'll worship you if you do all these things that I want you to do for me. Now, how many of you are a fan of the old school Disney cartoon movies? Anybody like Mulan and Emperor's New Groove, Lion King, all those old ones, man, so many good movies. If you're a fan of The Jungle Book, our prayer team is out in the lobby. They love to pray for you. Not a fan of that movie. But I think we can all agree the best Disney movie of all time is Aladdin. Aladdin is such an incredible movie. And the genie in Aladdin, he has the power to do whatever the person who releases him from the lamp asks for. His whole job is to grant whatever wishes they have. And sometimes we treat Jesus like that. We think he is just waiting around for us to ask him to do things for us. He gets us the parking spot. He gets us the job. He gets us the spouse. He gets us the 2.5 kids and the picket fence. He gets our team to the Super Bowl. And look, that's not how it works. Ask any Cowboys fan. That is just not how it works. Look, that me-first attitude is just so far off the mark. And we need to ask ourselves, is that how I'm viewing God? Is he a genie who does a bunch of stuff for me to make my life easier and to make me happier? Is he just sitting around waiting to wait on me like a servant trying to keep me happy? Or is he the Messiah? Is he the king who came to save us from the penalty of our sin? Is he the one who created the heavens and the earth? Is he the one who gives breath and life to everything? Is he the one with the final authority? If you think about the mindset of these people in Jerusalem, they praised Jesus as he rode in on that donkey. They praised him when they thought he was the king that they were hoping for. They praised him when they thought that he was going to solve all their earthly problems. But when they realized he had other plans, they got so mad and they couldn't handle it. They wanted their way. They wanted him to serve them. They wanted Jesus to serve them. And they completely missed the point. Because God is not our servant. Jesus is not our servant. We are the servants. We are the ones who follow what Jesus says. He created us, not the other way around. And so we worship Jesus not because he grants our every wish, but because he's God. Because he is the only righteous one. Because he is infinitely greater and wiser and stronger than anything we could ever possibly imagine. We worship Jesus because he is God. So we need to ask ourselves, am I worshiping a God who is a genie? Or am I worshiping the God that's in the Bible? The God that is perfect and gave up his life to save me. Jesus rode in on that donkey, and a few days later, he gave up his life on the cross. And look, as sad as it is for us to think about Jesus dying on the cross, we know that he gave up his perfect life to save us from our sin so that we can live with him for eternity. That is good news. And the good news is that Jesus didn't just come to save us from something temporary. He didn't come to save us from something small. He rode into Jerusalem to give us salvation from our sin so that we can spend eternity with him in heaven. He came to make today better. He came to make tomorrow better. And he came to rescue you and I for eternity. Let's pray. God, I thank you so much for what you do for us. Your immense love for people that make mistakes all the time is just incredible. I just thank you so much for that love, God. And I pray that you will help us to learn from the mistakes of these people in Jerusalem. And God, I pray that you would help us to really understand how great you truly are. And I pray that we will worship you because of who you are, not just because of our idea of a genie or getting things that we want. We thank you so much for who you are and what you've done for us. In your name, amen. Guys, hang tight with me for a minute. Listen, next week is Easter, and Joel is going to share an incredible message about what Jesus has done for you, about what Jesus has done for me, and about what he's done for your family and for your friends. So think today about who you're going to invite to church next week, because that could be the Sunday that completely changes their life.